All right. We are back. Session number 43.
Let's hit it.
Let's hit it.
On our session number 39, one of our regular viewers, Amal, had a couple of questions. So let's answer those. She said, is there a superior Dian Chohan who is the almighty God of all, or are they all gods? What would you say?
The Dian Chohan. So there's one Dian Chohan for our planet.
Really?
There are many Chohans. There are more than one Dian Chohan?
Almost indubitably.
We should show a diagram of the hierarchy.
Well, the Dian Chohans, as far as we know, is the next step after Buddha. There are many Chohans along the path between Adept and Buddha, and then who knows how many different steps between the achievement of being a Buddha and a Dian Chohan. And as we know, there are many, many different grades of Dian Chohans. Now, the adepts are somewhat reluctant to talk too much about the Dian Chohans, and partly because they don't have personal contact, as far as I can tell, normally with them. I don't doubt that there are, once in a while, some communications between them, but normally they go through channels, just like on any hierarchy. So they don't talk a whole lot about them, and so we're kind of conjecturing. But what we do note is that once they become a Dian Chohan, they have less to do with humanity than the lower members of the hierarchy. They are overseeing the entire process of a world and the evolution of that world and the system that supports that. So it's all of the kingdoms, the 7 that we know of, plus other kingdoms that we don't know about. They're also in charge of the Deva kingdoms, for example. So they interact less with humanity than some of the others do. And they never operate as one supreme know-it-all. Because their consciousness is merged with others near the same level of their accomplishment, and they operate as a network. So is there one that is perhaps the highest one? It would be only for our planet, and there probably is one that has a final say if there's any disagreement at all on any particular matter. But is there an almighty God such as to be in charge of the entire universe? That would be pure speculation on our part. So that's the answer. They operate very differently from the imagined deity of religions, where there's one that makes all the rules and has the final say on everything.
To our viewers and to my mom, I want to know these things too, and I question a lot, and I always ask or contemplate, how does this concept correlate to what we learn from Christianity, and is there a God, so to speak, in this tradition? And I also want to see like the data. Like I just asked Terry a moment ago, let's show a diagram. Well, my mind likes to see the linear facts. Like, let's see, okay, so we've got all of humanity, then we've got the Chelas, then we've got the adepts, but then KH isn't quite an adept yet, and then we have one step above, and then one step above that. And they don't reveal the facts like that. It's my challenge to accept the fact that the facts are not there. Like, the facts are not revealed on purpose. One thing that I do want to get clarification on, though, there's only one office of the Christ and Buddha, if I'm not mistaken.
No, there are numerous Buddhas. We've already had, what?
At a time, though.
Oh, at a time assigned to a particular planet, imagine. I don't know if that's a rule, but
This detail probably doesn't matter too much, but I like to view it kind of as a, I don't know, a hierarchy. We use and it doesn't have to be a pyramid, like all of humanity. And then as you get towards the most enlightened beings associated with our planet, there are fewer and fewer, and there might be one at the top, but maybe not. So if we think of the Buddha being one or two steps above the adepts, I don't know why there would be so many Dian Chohans above the Buddha. If the Buddha is one, then it goes back to many above that. That's
and
interesting.
this is the problem that the Mahatmas have dealing with the two Englishmen, because in the Age of Enlightenment in the 1800s, everything was scientific. You had to be able to prove everything. And so they're doing their best to accommodate them, but their brains do not work in the same manner. The Western mind wants this. I want it exactly this way so that I'm done with it. Once I understand it, that's it. I don't have to revisit it ever again. And the Eastern mind is very different. It's more malleable.
And then the question becomes, since I like to position myself as a teacher of sorts, and I do teach a lot of classes and courses on these things to yoga students, for example, and Terry and I both agree on this, that everything we teach, we want to be practical in a sense, and we want to position our teachings as a way to help you, and of course us as teachers, understand more about how the world works. And one of the things that I grapple with, and this is good because I'm a student, how do I use this information to figure out how the world works if I can't even understand it? And again, that's one of my challenges. So to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I'll hear it and I'll understand it at some point, hopefully, and we'll go with it.
And when you understand it, it's during meditation. It's not in discussion with 2 people or 14 people or anything of that matter. It's in meditation. That's when you have the opportunity to actually understand it.
One last point to this question, then it'll be a short point.
Yeah.
There is a concept of Ishvara, and we've talked about it before. Ishvara, sometimes spelled with a V, Ishvara, is discussed in this philosophy and in the Yoga Sutras. And if you're curious to do any research on your own, go to Google, Ishvara or Ishwara. It's spelled both ways. That is a concept of a non-personified, I don't want to use the word God, a non-personified meaning no face, no body entity that is used as the substratum or the absolute or it's hard to put it into words. Research it. This is sort of the concept of a consciousness that pervades everything. Ishvara.
And it's actually not helpful to put things in a box, to say, okay, now I've got it. I understand it completely. Because you never understand anything completely. It's best to leave it open. Say, this is how I perceive it at this point in time, and that could very well change, and it's almost certainly going to change. As far as the pronunciation of V in Sanskrit, it is a particular letter of the alphabet, but in some parts of India, they pronounce it V, and in some W. So Ishvara, Ishwara, Swami or Swami, it's one letter pronounced different ways. How do you define Jesus Christ's status? Is he the Son of God or something else? What would you say?
I mentioned this briefly a moment ago. The leadership of our world is composed of levels of consciousness, and we're all going to occupy these levels. That's how evolution works. I know that's sacrilege to some people. I know that. And what we say sometimes is not going to be accepted by certain traditions because of these kinds of concepts. But we're evolving, all of us. Every single person will occupy the level of, can I say it? The Christ.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We will. The level of the Buddha. We will. And if not on this planet, maybe another planet. I think that's accurate. But that, to me, makes so much sense, because if we're evolving, where's the end? There isn't an end. There is not an end to our evolution, and there wasn't a beginning. So specifically to answer the question, Christ is the name of a position, of a leadership position, just like the Buddha is.
And it's also a level of consciousness.
Right.
We talk about the
Right.
Christ consciousness.
Yes.
And that's the important part of it. It is a particular level of consciousness. And Paul is absolutely right that we will all reach that. The other part of this is, guess what? We are all sons of God. Every single one of us right now.
The word God, but it's tricky, but yes, we are, yeah.
We are. And that is the spiritual being, spiritual Ishvara, or anything connected with the spiritual evolution as the one, the all-encompassing, the one life. That is spirit, nothing else.
To contextualize that a little bit more, the man Jesus became very famous. He was probably a profound orator, and he amassed a very big following, more so after his death. He was a man who had a consciousness of this expanded level of awareness that we're calling the Christ level of consciousness. There was another man 500 years before him who was named Siddhartha Gautama, and he attained what may be an even higher level of consciousness, perhaps. And he was given the title of Buddha, or the office. He was like the CFO of the world. COO. And the Christ is the, I don't know, head of accounting. I don't know. But it's an office. So just because he has or has not a body, if you have a body, you're on the earth. If you don't have a body, you're still there. You're just not in a body. And I don't know why we haven't heard the names of some of the other offices, but we're hearing some of them now. Some of the names, the Dian Chohans, they probably took bodies at some point. So we've heard of Jesus. We've heard of Siddhartha Gautama. We've also heard of others. But for some reason, some dharmic duties of these teachers who came back, we can also call them Nirmanakayas, because they chose to take physical bodies and come to be born into bodies for a purpose. They had the duty to start religions. And there are probably others that we don't know about that were on earth or are on earth.
There is one other aspect to these universal teachers that we hear about: Osiris, Hermes, Mithra, Jesus Christ, Zoroaster, numerous teachers who are elevated to the status of a god of some sort. And here's the truth. Almost always it's based on, loosely, the story of a particular individual, but then over time it gets added to all of the myths and legends, and it becomes something far bigger than that individual actually was on earth. And there's nothing wrong with that, because these are spiritual principles. And so the person that the story of Jesus was based on was almost certainly a teacher, but we know almost nothing about his personal life. All of these stories began to be added 30 plus years after this individual died. And guess what? It was all told in the form of mouth-to-ear stories, and each person who repeated it added a little more and added their own thoughts and their own opinions to it. What we have today is probably only vaguely what that individual actually taught. And we need to keep that in mind. Now, we need to move forward. We are on letter number 71. We just finished up the 3 letters that comprised a trilogy regarding more information on Davidson. The first letter was from Hume to KH. The second letter was from AP Sinnett to HPB, asking her to get more information from the Mahatma KH. And the third letter was KH's answers to both of them. So we now have a lot more information about Devachan, and we're still going to learn more about it. All right, let's go ahead and start with letter 71, received at Shimla on August 12th, 1882. And KH is writing to Senate, and he's first going to quote a poem.
Yes, verily known and as confidently affirmed by the adepts, from whom no curtain hides the spheres Elysian, nor these poor shells of half-transparent dust, for all that blinds the spirit's vision is pride and hate and lust, not for publication.
For many years, the students who researched the Mahatma letters couldn't find a source for that, but it has been found finally. It was written in 1848 by a spiritualist by the name of Thomas Lake Harris, and it was published as a poem under the name A Hymn from the Inner Life. And he put not for publication because for a long time everyone thought, well, maybe he wrote it, but he didn't. He was repeating something, and for whatever reason, he said, don't publish this.
Exceptional cases, my friend. Suicides can and generally do, but not so with the others.
So let's look at that poem. He says, no curtain hides the spheres Elysian, which is a utopia, meaning the heaven world, nor these poor shells of half-transparent dust. He might be talking about the different spheres on the other side. I'm not sure what that refers to. And then he says, for the only thing, all that blinds the spirit's vision is pride and hate and lust. And that part is true, because that's what holds them back, holds all of us back. Once we get all of our lower nature completely under control, there's nothing that holds us back from enlightenment. So it actually has some merit to it, and KH agrees with that.
The shells could be talking about the people that were evil.
But that's pretty much a theosophical term.
And this author, Lake Harris, he wasn't a theosophist. He was a spiritualist.
Well, in 1848, no, he wasn't.
Oh, 48.
That was quite a few years before theosophy.
Oh, 1848.
So KH said these are exceptional cases where there is actually communication. Suicides can and generally do, but not so with the others, and we've gone over that in previous letters.
The good and pure sleep, a quiet, blissful sleep, full of happy visions of earth life, and have no consciousness of being already forever beyond that life.
And we learned that before. They don't even know that they're dead. The only two types of individuals who could actually know that they are dead are the adepts,
Mahatmas, right?
The Mahatmas, the adepts, and the black magicians, the ones in Avicii.
He says already forever beyond that life. Well, forever, that's tricky. I mean, that particular body is not going to come back, but the consciousness will.
And we discussed that before, that he used the term forever. And what he does, he's referring to that personality.
Right. Those who are neither good nor bad will sleep a dreamless but still a quiet sleep, while the wicked will, in proportion to their grossness, suffer the pangs of a nightmare lasting years. Their thoughts become living things, their wicked passions real substance, and they receive back on their heads all the misery they have heaped upon others. Yikes.
And this is the crux of karma. It is an energy. Anything you put out comes back to you, the results of it. So the same type of energy, the same amount of force that you put into it comes back to you. So it's pretty simple. You do kind things for somebody else, it comes back to you. You do something horrible to someone else, not caring whether it hurt them physically, emotionally, or mentally, and guess what? you're going to receive exactly what you put out. It's natural law. It can't be otherwise. And no Savior can wipe that away for you. Think about it. That's great for the perpetrator. Oh, I got all my sins pardoned by the priest, and now I'm clear. I murdered this person, I raped this individual, and I'm good now with Jesus. What about the victim? What about the people who suffered because of those actions? Well, they'll just have to learn how to pardon. Life doesn't work that way. In a way, it's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Whatever you put out is going to come back to you, not immediately, but at some point, you are going to receive every bit that you put out into the world. So keep that in mind.
It's a big warning. This that he's talking about here is only part of what we receive back, though, because don't forget that this individual is going to reincarnate, and that's when the opportunities will present themselves for this person to do better.
Yes.
In this after-death state, you can't do anything about it. You have to just sit with it, so to speak, and kind of suffer through it because of the energy that's built up. It's not a punishment, by the way. It's just a result of the energy. If this person would have really... Now, what if repentance actually came from the idea that we've been teaching this whole time? Resolve your SHIT before you pass away. Like this murderer, what if he resolved it before he died? It's possible to change your actions. You're going to have karma, though, but this after-death state is a result of not resolving it prior to death. The energy that was created, the angst, the nervousness, the anxiety, the fear that you gave to the world is part of you too. And that's what we're talking about here. It has to discharge, like a battery has to sit and discharge over time, and then it's neutral. This isn't the understanding and the lessons learned yet. That happens when he or she reincarnates into a body.
And remember that we learned that the Mahatmas are not in favor of the death penalty because that cuts off any chance in this lifetime to make any redemption whatsoever for what that person did.
Good point. If someone does have 20, 30 years in prison or even out of prison after they did a lot of bad stuff, they can resolve some of the energy and have a very different after-death state. That does not wipe away the karma created unless somehow they had karma in this life that they could resolve.
It does to the extent that they feel remorse and they change their attitude
in this life.
And the fact that they are confined, remember, we're all cribbed, cabined, and confined, but a prisoner is really confined to a very small space. And guess what they do? They read, they ponder, they think about things. And that's exactly what they should be doing.
Reality and fact, if described, would yield a far more terrible inferno than even Dante had imagined.
And that's, of course, the poet in the Middle Ages that wrote about hell, all imaginary, but the real hell is the hell that people go through in Kamaloka and, if you're bad enough, in Avicii.
That was letter 71.
All right, very short. Letter number 72 also is a letter from K.H., but it was written to both Sinnett and Hume. And we don't have the original. We have the extracts that were written down by Sinnett. This was received just one day later on August 13th.
One of your letters begins with a quotation from one of my own. Remember that there is within man no abiding principle, which sentence I find followed by a remark of yours. How about the sixth and seventh principles?
So Buddhi and Atma. What about those two principles? Don't they abide in man?
Right. I mean, I'm very similar to...
That's a very good question.
I'm similar to Sinnett and Hume here. To this I answer, neither Atma nor Buddhi ever were within man. A little metaphysical axiom that you can study with advantage in Plutarch and Anaxagoras.
Plutarch was a Roman historian, and Anaxagoras was Greek, and he was a philosopher and scientist.
Buddha said, "You have to get completely rid of all the subjects of impermanence composing the body, so that your body should become permanent."
So now we're hearing why the sixth and seventh principles don't abide within man. It's not that it should manifest through the personality, but that the personality should reach up to it.
The permanent never merges with the impermanent, although the two are one.
A conundrum.
Wow. This is an example of what Terry said earlier, that the Eastern mind works differently than the West. To me, you know that little emoji with the head that's blowing up, that little emoji, that's me right now. It's like...
So I guess the goal is to switch our European mindset over to the Eastern mindset, if that's even possible.
Yeah, right. But it is only when all outward appearances are gone that there is left that one principle of life which exists independently of all external phenomena. And when he says outward appearances, he probably means the lower quaternary, the body, the emotions, the mind, the lower mind. It is the fire that burns in the eternal light, when the fuel is expended and the flame is extinguished. For that fire is neither in the flame, nor in the fuel, nor yet inside either of the two, but above, beneath, and everywhere.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And that's something you have to meditate on. The words don't make sense, and yet you could feel it.
Yeah. And this is taken from a sutra teaching that we don't know about.
I haven't been able to find it anywhere. If someone knows, please let us know.
It's called the Parinirvana Sutra Kyoun.
And that's spelled Kiouen, and it's sutra number 39, but I wasn't able to find it.
I have a side note to this. The way that he's describing, well, actually, KH is quoting
the Buddha.
Actually, okay, so the quotations end right there. That means this whole thing was what the Buddha was saying?
Yes. I believe so, because in the original, he forgot to put the quotation marks. So I had to read through it several times and figure out where, because like I said, I haven't been able to find it online.
If he's saying the Buddha said this, the Parinirvana Sutra would be a Buddhist text.
Right. But I couldn't find it. And it's not in any of the theosophical commentaries. I'm sure everyone else has looked for it. But
let me make one more side note on this. Funny enough, I've actually heard chakras described in a sort of similar way, because chakras are not physical. They're in our pranic body. And he's describing this fire of spirit that burns in the eternal light when the fuel is expended and the flame is extinguished, for that fire is neither in the flame, nor in the fuel, nor yet inside either of the two, but above, beneath, and everywhere. I've heard like a meditation teacher guide, how do you meditate on a chakra? Well, your heart chakra, it's not inside your heart. It's not below your head. Maybe it's above you. Maybe it's all around you. Maybe it's to the side of you. It's not physical. So how do you meditate on it? That's so interesting. It's very, very interesting.
Yes, exactly.
All right, continuing along. Since you want to acquire gifts, set to work and try to develop clarity. What a concept.
Now, he used the word lucidity.
Okay.
Which is the same as clarity as far as I know, but lucidity to me seems a little more vague. Clarity to me seems a little more clear.
It's almost like remove your biases and see the way it is.
Right. And that's what we're talking about when we say develop discernment. Remove the filters that we put in front of everything. Remove all of those filters, and then you see the object itself without any interference.
This is not a gift, but a universal possibility for all. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. That it's not that some people are born with it and some aren't. We're all born with that possibility.
As Luke Burke puts it, idiots and dogs have it, and to a more remarkable degree often than the most intellectual men.
I tried to find out who this Luke Burke is, and I couldn't find anyone. So I thought that was really quite interesting, though. Idiots and dogs have it. Clarity, lucidity, and to a more remarkable degree often than the most intellectual men. He might be pointing to Hume when he says that.
That's funny.
But what he means is that they don't put emotional baggage onto stuff. They see things, idiots and dogs, animals, all animals, see things as they are. They don't imagine things in their mind, at least I don't think they do, like humans do. We add all of this junk to stuff that is right before us, instead of just looking at it and saying, there's a tree or whatever.
Yeah.
We have to add all of this stuff to it that may or may not be true, and it's not helpful in most cases.
Seeing without naming is a practice that Eckhart Tolle teaches, and we talk about a lot. If you can look at an object in nature and not name it, not label it, not judge it, not put any opinions or attributes to it, just observe it without chattering about it. That's this.
And feel the energy.
Yes.
Be aware, and animals are definitely aware of energy.
Oh, yeah.
Far better than humans are.
It is because neither idiots nor dogs use their reasoning faculty,
Yeah.
but allow their natural instinctive perceptions to have full play.
Exactly.
That is so amazing.
So
That's
when
amazing.
someone asked us one time in Hollywood whether or not animals meditate, and the answer was they don't have to. They are in tune with nature.
They are.
And we have to learn from them how to do it.
You use too much sugar in your food.
Okay, now he's going to tell him how to develop clarity.
Wow. Take fruit, bread, tea, coffee, and milk and use them as freely as you would like to, but no chocolate, fat, pastry, and only very little sugar. The fermentation produced by it, especially in that climate of yours, is very injurious.
Remember in a previous letter when he was talking about the effects of too much sugar and that it caused the development of worms in the digestive system? So whether or not that's true, I don't know, but that was the belief in those days.
The methods used for developing clarity in our chelas may be easily used by you. Every temple has a dark room, the north wall of which is entirely covered with a sheet of mixed metal, chiefly copper, very highly polished, with a surface capable of reflecting things as well as a mirror.
Now remember, he's still talking about how Sinnett can develop clarity.
The chela sits on a three-legged insulated stool placed in a flat-bottomed vessel of thick glass. The Lama operator likewise. What?
So you have a wall in the temple, the north wall in a room, completely covered with sheets of metal. This sheet is highly polished, reflects just like a mirror. And you've got two big vessels made of heavy, thick glass. In each one, you've got a three-legged stool, wooden, I'm sure, with the chela on one and the Lama operator on the other, both facing towards the wall.
Lama operator, so a Buddhist?
Yeah, a Lama in the monastery, one of their teachers.
Huh. The two forming a triangle with the mirror wall. A magnet with the north pole up is suspended over the crown of the chela's head without touching it. The operator, having started the thing going, leaves the chela alone, gazing at the wall, and after the third time is no longer required.
So now you know how to develop clarity, lucidity. All you have to do is buy great big sheets of copper. But I think the most difficult part is finding a Lama who knows how to show you how to use the system. putting the system together wouldn't be that difficult. A little costly, maybe.
I'm surprised he's telling us this.
It's quite interesting.
This is like an esoteric technology that you'd think he would not
Exactly.
be allowed to tell us.
But on the other hand, if you don't have the person who can demonstrate it for you, you're probably going to waste lots and lots of money and an enormous amount of time, and who knows whether or not you'll get any results.
Leaves the chela alone gazing at the wall, and after the third time...
I'm assuming that after the third time, the lama isn't required. The chela can do it on his own. Very interesting stuff that every once in a while, you wouldn't find this stuff anywhere else.
Let's build one.
Okay.
We got to find a llama.
Yeah, that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Let's find the lama.
I wonder if we need a llama. What if we can...
Well, we might be able to figure it out on our own. Why don't you
Wow.
do that? You can actually go online and you can, I looked, there are places, there's one called polishedmetals.com, polished metals, and they provide huge sheets of all kinds of metals, polished to a mirror finish. They're extremely expensive, but you can do it.
This vessel, we got to figure the vessel thing out.
Now, I guess what we have to figure out is, does it have to be like 20 feet by 10 feet, or can it just be like 4 by 8, or what's the minimum we can get by with? All these questions that have to do with interior design in the temples.
That was letter 72. These are short.
That letter number 72 wasn't even signed. This next one, 73, was received at Shimla also in August 1882, but we don't know what date. This one was written only to Sinnett, and we'll find out why.
Private, period. My dearest friend, please pardon me for troubling you with my own business, but although I am forced by the Chohan to answer, and I really don't know whether or not I am within the limits of your code of politeness, I have a long letter to write to you about something that troubles me, and I want you to advise me. I am in a most disagreeable position, placed as I am between the risk of betraying a friend, not you, and your Western code of honor. I hope I may place entire confidence in your personal friendship and, of course, your honor. Wow, KH is asking Sinnett for help.
Oh, yeah, he's asked for help before,
Wow.
but he's put in a very strange predicament. Hume, from the very beginning, has had one goal in his mind.
Clairvoyance.
He was going to force the Mahatmas to teach him how to perform phenomena. Through his vastly superior intellect, he knew that he was far above them in intelligence, and he was certain that they would bow to his wishes, and that he just had to figure out the means of making that happen. And they would teach him how to do it. He assumed that these are just fakirs in India who somehow stumbled onto this method, and that if they wanted to, they could teach him. And they've tried and tried for 2 years, 2 solid years, to convince him that isn't how it happens. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't teach you, because there is a very long, arduous process you have to go through. He thinks they're lying, basically. Mm-hmm. The Chohan has told KH that he has to write this letter, and KH is not at all inclined to do so.
Oh, wow. So KH is asking for his confidence and his honor.
And yeah, he said, and of course, I'm asking for your honor.
And then he says, honor, what funny, very funny notions you seem to have about that sacred thing. Don't be frightened. The whole thing is more ludicrous than dangerous. Still, there's a danger of losing Mr. Hume.
Yes.
Tomorrow I will write more fully. Fern is a little ass, but he is clairvoyant, although also hallucinating a little. Nevertheless, Mr. Hume is too severe on him.
All right. So, who is Fern? Edmund Fern was a young boy, probably in his mid-20s, and he had been working for Hume for several months already as a type of secretary. Remember, in January of this year, 1882, there were 4 individuals who were given probationary status, and apparently not all of them realized it. Hume and Sinnott were 2 of the ones who did not realize it, and probably C.C. Massey. But the one who did know he was put on probation was this young man, Mr. Fern. And they were able to communicate with because he was clairvoyant.
Wow.
And of course, they had high hopes for him, just like they had for so many other possible replacements for HPB. He already had a high degree of clairvoyance. There were a few problems, though, and we'll find that out.
The boy hopes to prove whether we are myths or frauds, and if so, he will reveal that. Well, where is the harm in such hallucination? But then Hume betrays his confidence and sends me a letter 3 yards long with advice on how to get out of our difficulties. Of the master's difficulties?
Yeah, so Hume sent them a very long letter. He got Alcott and HPB involved in this. It was a whole drama. And the story was that Fern decided that he was going to figure out whether or not these Mahatmas were a myth. He lived in the same household as Hume, so he had absorbed all of his misgivings and concerns about the Mahatmas. And so he's like, just hold on here. I can bring this out. I can figure out how to determine whether or not they are true. So what he did is he claimed that he had a vision.
Fern did.
Yeah. And that in this vision, there were 3 individuals involved that we will find out about. One of them was Moria, and the other was KH. And the third one, I believe, was the Chohan, but it's a little murky in some points. He had a scheme where he was going to ask them whether or not he wanted this vision published. And based on what they said, that was going to reveal whether or not they were real. He figured that if they had an ego, they would say something, either yay or nay, but which would reveal that they didn't realize that it was a test.
He wants to be our benefactor and place us under an eternal obligation for saving Moria from falling into Fern's trap.
So that was Hume's part of this. He's like, oh, they will be forever in my debt if I prevent them from falling into this trap. So I'm going to alert them as to what he's planning to do.
Well, I'm sure they already knew. They monitor all this stuff.
Yeah, but Hume doesn't believe them. He thinks they're liars, if they even exist.
I would have forwarded his letter to you.
Meaning Hume's.
But he wrote private and confidential, and I would be no gentleman in his eyes were he to discover such a breach of confidence. Well, I want you to read my reply, and will leave it up to you whether to send it or destroy it. If you don't want him to know you have read it, then put a stamp on it and throw it in the letterbox. I don't think he will take you into his confidence this time, but I could be wrong. Soon you will learn more. Yours affectionately, K.H.
All right, so he's put him on notice that there's a long letter coming, and it's actually written to Hume, but I want you, Sinnott, to read it and tell me whether or not it conforms to your Western code of conduct.
So the next letter is the actual letter.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we have this. My goodness.
So, yeah, and it's 26 handwritten pages. I spent hours and hours and hours because it's very convoluted and language that is very difficult to condense down. But I did the best I could and got it down to about half of what it was.
That probably hasn't been done ever.
Oh, I'm quite sure. This is the letter to Hume, but sent to Sinnett for his review.
Private. My dear brother. So now, yeah, KH is speaking to Hume, and at this point, Hume has not received it.
And knows nothing about it.
But Hume did write a long letter to
But
KH.
yes, he did. He may or may not be expecting a reply, probably is, but he doesn't know that this is going to Sinnett first.
My dear brother, a week ago I would have embraced the opportunity to say that your letter concerning Mr. Fern is as complete a misrepresentation of the spirit of Moria's attitude towards the young gentleman as your complete ignorance of the aim he is pursuing and what it could produce, and I would have said no more. But now things have changed. And though you have come to know that we did not really possess the power of reading minds, as had been pretended, nevertheless, we know enough of the spirit in which my last letters were received, and of the dissatisfaction produced, to suspect that, unwelcome as truth may often be, nevertheless, the time has arrived for me to speak frankly and openly with you. Ooh.
This is
I'm here for
very
it.
unusual for...
No, he's putting his foot down. That's important.
Yeah, and Moria, by the way, would have none of this nonsense. He, from the very beginning, told them how things were and didn't mince words. KH dances all around trying to not offend people, but as we see, that is very costly. And he admits it. He says, it probably would be better if I were more like Moria and less like the way I operate. And part of it is his education in Europe, because he's trying really hard to communicate with these Englishmen in their own manner and in their own way of doing things.
Lying is a refuge for the weak. Wow. Wow. That's... If we get nothing out of this session, that's...
Yeah, exactly.
Lying is a refuge for the weak. That is so true.
Yeah. And he's going to go into a lot of detail about how Westerners convolute things trying to be proper.
Yeah. Lying is a refuge for the weak, and we are strong enough, despite all the shortcomings you are pleased to discover in us, that we dread the truth very little, nor are we likely to lie in order to appear wise concerning matters of which we are ignorant. That is so crazy, because they're the opposite of this. Like all the other spiritual teachers who claim to do this and that, they're the ones who are doing this, not these masters.
And they've got numerous examples where they told them things that they would not know if they were not able to project their consciousness into their presence.
Yeah.
And yet Hume does not believe that.
So maybe it would have been more accurate to say that you knew we did not really possess the power of reading minds unless we brought ourselves thoroughly in sync with and focused our attention on the person whose thoughts we wanted to know, since that would be an undeniable fact, instead of the gratuitous assumption in your letter.
So he's pointing out, yes, we can't read someone's mind unless we purposely decide to. We project our consciousness and we put ourselves in sync with their vibrations. It requires a tremendous effort on our part. If you had said that, that would have been true. But instead, Hume said, they don't know how to do that.
However it may be, I now find only two options before us and no room for compromise. Ooh, I like this tone, though. I do. Henceforth, if you desire us to work together, we must do so on a foundation of perfect understanding. Yes, you'll be perfectly free to tell us what you believe, that we are credited with knowing things we really don't know, and I will be entitled to let you know what I think of you, and you must promise not to bear a grudge for it, which of course he will, because he's
Yeah,
emotional.
the rest.
Something that, despite your best efforts, you can't help. Right, because he's emotional. And in case you think I'm mistaken, that you will prove it by something more than a mere denial. See,
Boom, yeah.
I'm so glad he's doing this, though.
You can tell it's really painful for him to talk that way, but he's making himself do it.
This is
It's pretty cool.
that you would do.
Yeah, you would. You think I learned that from?
This is how you are.
Yes.
You have the eloquence of this. When you need it, you do it. Because I've been the recipient of it. But you are so similar to KH in so many ways.
I pay attention when I read these things, and I have learned a lot from these guys.
Even before our session of videos, I see these qualities. That's amazing.
I've been studying this material for 30, 40 years.
Unless you bind yourself by such a promise, it is completely useless for any of us to be wasting our time in controversies and correspondence. Better to shake hands astrally across space and wait until you have acquired the gift of discerning truth from falsehood to a greater degree than you now have, or until we are shown to be no better than impostors, or worse, lying spooks. Or finally, that one of us be in a position to demonstrate our existence to you or Mr. Sinnott and visit you personally.
And that's what they've been wanting from the very beginning.
Right.
Just meet us somewhere and we'll sit down and thrash all of this out.
I am sort of surprised that they still haven't met, though, after all this.
They had a chance, remember?
Yes.
A couple of chances to not meet physically, but at least to have an interaction with them. And because of their stirring up the old lady, it fell apart.
Well, there's also one instance where Sinnott had to get back to his family.
Right, and that was when he was asked to go to Bombay for the annual convention. He went there, picked up his wife, and left, and didn't stay as he had been requested to, and missed an opportunity.
At this point, had Alcott met either of the masters?
Oh, he's seen several different masters.
But in person or just astrally, do we think?
Astrally, mostly, although soon after this, he will meet KH in the physical body.
And HPB obviously has met them.
Oh,
physically.
she has studied with them in Tibet and in India. In person, yes.
Since it becomes quite hopeless to convince you that we occasionally do read people's thoughts, may I hope that you will credit us at least with sufficient knowledge of the English language so as not to have entirely misunderstood your very plain letter, and to believe me when I say that, having perfectly understood it, I answer you just as plainly, since, my dearest brother, you are egregiously mistaken from first to last. And is that what Hume said to him?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, there are lots of quotes quoting from Hume's letter.
Wow. Your whole letter is based upon a misconception, an entire ignorance of missing links, which might have given you a true key to the whole situation. What can you mean by the following? And then he's going to quote.
Now he's quoting from Hume's letter to him.
Would you like me to read that part too?
Yeah.
Okay. My dear master, amongst you, well, he's respectfully calling him my master. Maybe he's being sarcastic.
Yes, and I think that's exactly it. Wow. And he's going to address that.
Wow. My dear master, amongst you, you are utterly spoiling Fern. It is 1,000 pities, for he is really a good fellow at heart, and he has an intense desire for occult knowledge, and strong will, and a great capacity for self-mortification. He would, I am sure, be useful for your purposes, but his self-conceit is growing intolerable, and he is becoming a confirmed fabricator of fiction, and this is due to you all. He has thoroughly humbugged Moria. Now,
meaning tricked him.
So Hume is saying this to KH.
Right. Because Fern has already communicated with them about his supposed vision.
From the beginning, he's thoroughly humbugged Moria, and he has gone persistently lying to Sinnott to keep up the delusion. He has got Moria to entrust him with secrets and to accept him as a chela, and he now thinks himself a match for anyone. Moria replies, quite falling into the trap, this fraud no doubt commenced in your interests.
And here he used some ellipses, so he was kind of skipping, just quoting little bits and pieces.
So Hume thinks that, first of all, Moria is not going to fall into, not be tricked by anyone.
No, but
and
Hume
secondly,
has no confidence in their abilities, none.
And secondly, KH already knows what's going on.
It's like, as intelligent as he is, he's not very smart.
Wow. Okay, so now this is now KH again.
Right.
It is unnecessary for me to repeat again what I have said before, that before receiving your first letter concerning Mr. Fern, I had never given him one moment's attention. That's not true, though. But he certainly had given him attention.
No, because let me point out that he was on probation, Fern was, but as Moria's pupil, not KH's.
Okay. So then who spoils that young gentleman? Is it Moria? It is easy to see that you know even less of him than he knows about you. He has thoroughly humbugged Moria, has he? I'm sorry to have to tell you that it would appear rather the reverse, that it was my beloved brother who humbugged Mr. Fern. The other consideration is probation, something every chela who does not want to remain simply ornamental has, like it or not, to undergo for a more or less prolonged period, something that you Westerners will always view as a system of humbug or deception because they don't like being tested.
No,
they want to be told all the things. They don't like how their masters are a little bit secretive, but it's for a reason, and they think that's trickery and dishonesty, but it's not.
And in their mind, we are so vastly superior to any Asians. We're not going to kowtow to you. We're not going to follow your rules. Just forget about all of this testing that you talk about. Tell us the damn information.
Thus, what you have now mistaken for humbug as coming from Mr. Fern, you would accuse M of doing. The truth is that Mr. Fern was warned beforehand. If you have read the correspondence as you say you have, you must have learned from HPB's letter to Fern, sent from Madras, that in her jealousy for M's favors, she wrote to him, hoping she would frighten him off.
Now, I'm not quite sure what he meant by that. It's a little bit vague. I don't know if she meant she would frighten Fern off or what.
Yeah.
I guess.
I'm sure she's not jealous of Moria's.
No, of course not.
Yeah. A chela under probation is allowed to think and do whatever he likes. And that's the point. The masters are watching what they do when they think no one's watching, right?
Exactly.
That's the whole point of it. He was warned beforehand that he would be tempted and deceived by appearances. Two paths will open before you, both leading to the goal you are trying to attain. One easy, that will lead you more rapidly to the fulfillment of orders you may receive. The other more arduous, much longer, a path full of stones and thorns that will make you stumble more than once on your way, and at the end of which you may, perhaps, find failure after all, and be unable to carry out the orders given for some particular small task. But whereas the latter will cause the hardships you have undergone to be recorded on the side of your credit, the easy path can offer you only a momentary gratification, an easy fulfillment of the task. The chela is at perfect liberty and often quite justified from the standpoint of appearances to suspect his guru of being a fraud. More than that, the greater his indignation, whether expressed in words or seething within his heart, the more fit he is to become an adept.
So it's okay if you get angry at your Mahatma that's got you on probation. She says, go for it. The more angry you get, the more fit you are for an adept.
Is that true?
Yeah, because you are putting your heart and soul into this. And there are times, I'm sure, when it becomes so frustrating that you think everything absolutely possible, and yet they are deceiving you in many cases. It would be a very, very frustrating situation. Call them names. They don't care.
I mean, they don't want their chelas to do that without question, but
At some point, you have to have complete confidence in them.
right.
If you don't, then it's useless to try to go forward.
But complete confidence and seething in your heart, those aren't compatible.
But that's part of the process.
So they all have to.
They don't have to. The European chelas would probably be more apt to get angry. The Asian chelas probably have enough
I'm thinking of Damodar.
in their
I'm sure he will.
right. No, I can't imagine him getting angry
Right.
or some of the others. But they have that long tradition. They know what they're up against from the beginning. The Europeans have no idea, so they would be more apt to get angry and frustrated.
And it's almost expected as part of the chela ship
and they
process.
don't care.
Yeah.
Get angry at us.
Yeah.
We don't care as long as it all turns out in the end.
Right. He is free to use and will not be held to account for using the most abusive words and expressions regarding his guru's actions and orders, provided he comes out victorious from the fiery ordeal, provided he resists every temptation, rejects every allure, and proves that nothing, not even the promise of that which he holds dearer than life, his future adeptship, is unable to make him deviate from the path of truth and honesty or force him to become a deceiver. That is not at all Hume, so I don't know.
No. And this is why we're spending this much time on this. If it were only the story about Fern and his stupid plan, we could go through that in 20 minutes and be done with it. But there is some really, really good information in here.
Wow. This is, oh my goodness. He continues, my dear sir, we will hardly ever agree in our ideas of things, or even on the value of words. You called us Jesuits once upon a time, and viewing things as you do, perhaps you were right to a certain extent, since apparently our systems of training do not differ much.
Now, this is particularly interesting because apparently Mr. Fern was educated by Jesuits. And he has some Jesuitical traits.
Is that a
you
Christian
might say.
sect?
It's an
Similar.
order in the Catholic Church. I don't know a whole lot about them, but it really is worthwhile to do some research on their history. It is sordid. They are the most devious individuals.
Jesuits.
They were at one point involved in human slavery.
Is the image of like robes and gowns appropriate? Like druids chanting? Not that's something different.
That type. They are more intellectual.
Okay.
They're all about the intellect. They think they are
Jesuits.
the most intellectual of the monastic Christians, Catholics that exist. And there were times when they had super control over the church in certain countries. In France, they kicked them out of the entire country,
Wow.
kicked out their order and said, we're not allowing you in France. So, yeah, they have a very sordid history, and it's not pretty at all. They have very questionable ethics.
But it is only externally. As I said before, they know that what they teach is a lie. Wow. And we know that what we impart is truth, the only truth. Ooh, that's a little dangerous to say, though, the only truth.
They have said in the past that, yes, it is found in certain religions, for example, esoteric Christianity, in esoteric Brahmanism, but in all of these exoteric religions, it is hopelessly muddled and distorted.
They work for the greater power and glory of their order. We work for the power and final glory of individuals, of humanity in general. They work and deceive for the sake of worldly power in this life. We work and allow our chelas to be temporarily deceived in order to assure that they will never be deceived hereafter, and to see the whole evil of untruth, not just in this life, but in future lives.
So their whole work is to bless and save humanity, nothing else. And when they say save humanity, they mean to teach them how to reduce suffering, how to become enlightened so that they let go of all the lower qualities that we're hampered by.
And when he says they allow their chelas to be temporarily deceived, it's not that they're lying, right? It's the process of training them.
Yes.
But it's not.
And they are
lie.
warned ahead of time. This is what's going to happen. And then they test them.
Right.
And that includes deception. And they tell them that's the only time that they're allowed to do that. Because if they could do that at will, like the Jesuits do, whenever it suits
Personal
their
needs.
emotional, selfish needs, then they wouldn't be Mahatmas.
The Jesuits sacrificed the inner principle, the spiritual brain of the ego, to develop the physical brain of the personal evanescent man, sacrificing the whole of humanity to offer it as a holocaust to their society. The insatiable monster feeding on the brain and marrow of humanity and developing an incurable cancer on every spot of healthy flesh it touches. Wow.
They can be quite vicious.
Wow.
Please take the time to do a little bit of research into their history.
My goodness. We, the criticized and misunderstood brothers, seek to bring men to sacrifice their personality for the welfare of all humanity, hence for their own immortal egos, a part of the latter, since humanity is a fraction of the integral whole that it will one day become. Wow.
Yeah.
Humanity is a fraction of the integral whole that it will one day become. My goodness.
Yeah.
They,
Humanity is one phase of all of this evolution. Once we successfully pass through this very crucial phase of our existence, and if we do that successfully, then we become adepts, then bodhisattvas, and then Dhyan Chohans.
They are trained to deceive, we to undeceive, which is clarity, seeing clearly. They do the scavenger's work themselves for selfish ends. We leave it to our menials, the dugpas in our service, by giving them carte blanche for the time being and with the sole object of drawing out the whole inner nature of the chela, most of the nooks and crannies of which would remain dark and concealed forever, if not for the opportunity to test each of them in turn. Whether the chela wins or loses, the prize depends entirely on himself.
So pay attention to that. The Jesuits do the dirty work themselves. The Mahatmas allow the Dugpas, the brothers of the shadow, to do it for them. Remember, quite a few letters back, just before K.H. went into Samadhi, he talked about going to visit Sakya Jang, which was a monastery run by these brothers of the shadow. He went into the enemy's camp and had some kind of communications with them. So they recognized them as brothers, the good and the evil. And they're both necessary. And they allow the dark brothers to test their own chelas to see whether they have what is required to become a Mahatma.
That's interesting.
So let me read a letter, the one and only letter that for sure was received by Fern from the Mahatma Maurya. Remember, Fern, along with 3 other people, Sinnett and Hume among them, being put on probation the previous January. Fern was the one who knew that he was on probation. And there were a few interesting experiences with him. So just to get an idea of whether or not Maurya would have been humbugged by this young whippersnapper, let's read this. I'll read it here. So this was sent to Edmund W. Fern, Esquire, FTS, Fellow of the Theosophical Society, and this was sometime in 1882, and he says, Maurya writing to Fern, greeting to my still faithful Chela. Obviously, he had written something along that line. Thought the father was dead, huh? Well then, know, sonny, to what that long silence, that more surprised than grieved you, is due. It is your favor in which I am notified that the packet was delivered to its address and upset my usual placidity. 2 or 3 sentences it contained, besides the news, are well calculated to make even an adept scratch his head. Especially solemn and mysterious is the one that begins with, "As you know, my father, I belong," etc., and referring to a certain secret society. This news that you belong, besides the Theosophical, to another society in which no one member knows the other, and one that neither practices nor tolerates deceit, filled me with awe and admiration, no less than that other piece of news that informed me that some of its members claimed to know and communicate with me. Alas, notwithstanding your assurance, as you know, I confess to my great shame that I know very little of it, probably owing to your usual precaution. Hitherto, you had locked it up so safely in a remote corner of your brain and composed your mind so well when writing to me that of course I was unable to get at it. Yes, we know little of it, too grand and respectable for us altogether, notwithstanding the acquaintance claimed, and since regardless of its Carbonari-like character, that precludes the possibility of one member knowing any other member. Carbonari were a secret organization in Italy.
Sounds like a creamy pasta.
Yeah. Knowing any other member, you still seem to know several of them who claim to know and hold relations with me. I must naturally infer that you are very high in it, this secret society. Its president, perhaps? The high, venerable master? Well, this suspicion led me to think that one so high in a society that neither tolerates nor practices deceit could not care to belong to our poor brotherhood that does both regarding its probationists, hence my silence. But since in your following you so touchingly complained of not having been blessed with a communication from me, I am again constrained to infer that you have not yet thrown us altogether overboard, our deceitful ways notwithstanding, and that even everything done by you to show your distrust of us, since that letter of yours was written, was again done not to keep on the safe side with us, but with the same laudable motive of serving the cause. Yes, truly, my son, though so much doubted and maligned, you are grand in one certain direction at any rate. Chandra Kusho, whose rather savage appearance you will excuse, will explain to you the situation far better in words than any letter of mine can. And Chandra Kusho was another one of his chelas who was an Indian, and he apparently sent him to explain in person some of these things. You will have to accept his conditions, or, my grief notwithstanding, we shall have to part company. Apparently, his appearance was a little bit savage. In Fern and Hume's world, that may have been a big problem. Meanwhile, my beloved son and faithful Chela, do not think of me any the worse if I close this letter with sending you a second warning. Yours still lovingly, M. So does that sound like somebody that would be humbugged by this young guy? You see what they have to put up with? And it's all because they're trying to find a replacement for HPB. She's almost completely worn out at this point, could die at any time based on her health. Remember, a few weeks ago, she was all set to go visit them and hopefully be restored to a healthier condition. And then the Chohan said, nope, that's not going to happen. And so Moria had to tell her to unpack her trunks, and she was beside herself. She was so upset. She wrote to Senate and railed against them, calling them dried up old big bugs. Heartless, dried up old big bugs. And she said, I have to say it even if they pulverize me. And fortunately, as we learned, they don't care if one of their chelas gets angry at them as long as they get over it. So, yeah, we get some real insight into who these people are. To me, they are so genuine, so real, that why these two Englishmen couldn't realize that, I don't know. We're going to continue this. We've still got some more to learn, and it has a lot to do with probationary chelas and accepted chelas. So really good information, and we will pick up at that point in our next session, number 44. All right. We will see you in our next exciting episode of the Mahatma dealing with this young clairvoyant chela on probation. Thank you for watching.